I'm really excited to be here with such a dynamic group of women on stage. Each of them have all created their own very unique paths in tech, and you're going to have a wonderful time learning about each of their paths and how they've made it in tech. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, starting with Ina to my right, and then we'll get into some further discussion.
So, hi everyone, my name is Ina Yulo and I'm from BrightTalk. I am the global manager of BrightTalk's FinTech and financial services community, as well as our Women in Business community. So I never really had any inkling about getting into technology. My background has always been in marketing and advertising. I fell into tech a little bit by accident, which is, I know, a common story. It's also based on need, because that was the only kind of jobs that were in the market when I was looking for one. But I have to say that I am very happy in there. I've been in the tech industry now for about 4.5 years, and yeah, still happily going on.
Emily. Should I go back with the slides?
Hi, I'm Danielle. I started off studying French at university. Went on to do marketing and then found coding.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. I used to work in finance, and then I realised I hated it and discovered software engineering. Since then, I'm now a software engineer at the BBC. I'm also a co-director of Lesbians Who Tech in London, as well as co-founder of an organisation called Women Driven Development, play on test-driven development, for anyone who knows a bit of TDD. And that's a charitable organisation that I run as well.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I've got my first tech job at 49. I've had a career break of, I think it's about 22 years. I used to work as a graphic designer when up to I was about 26, and then I went freelance. I'm now working as a developer. I've also got my own tech startup as well, so I'm co-founder too, and I can tell you more about all of that later.
Hello, very nice to meet you all, see you all. My name is Tina Diamond, I go by Diamond. I started off in Silicon Valley way before any bubble, and I got into technology because a friend of mine worked at a startup, and it sounded really cool, and they had Friday Feast where they gave you lots of food every Friday, and it just sounded like there was always something going on, and that kind of attracted me, and it paid a lot better than what other kind of banking and anything else was doing. So I got a job, and I stayed because I really enjoyed what people were doing, how they were doing it, the culture, kind of the inspiring ideas, and then kind of 7 startups later. I don't think Amazon's a startup anymore, but I'm at AWS, and I'm on the business side of things. So I'm very impressed by all these ladies that I'm on the panel with.
Hello, I'm Maria. I'm a computer science graduate, and I work at The Guardian. I've been working there for 3 years, and it is my first job. And yeah, I work as a Scala developer, and I really enjoy it. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
Okay, great. So, to start off, Danielle, I'm quite curious after your introduction to know what inspired you to get into the tech industry, and in particular, what methods did you follow to get there?
It was kind of a strange one. I've taken on a freelance job to manage a WordPress website. It was a very small job for a small company. It was for like a committee. And one day they'd asked me to try and fix the drop-down menu, and this was all done through no-code. I was just using the interface. And through the interface, you couldn't change what they wanted to change. So I kind of looked around the website and found all this writing that turned out to be code, and I'd never seen that before in my life. Change something, could I change like the color? I got a bit excited. And then I deleted the whole thing by mistake. And the whole website had no CSS whatsoever. I panicked. This was like late at night in my bedroom. And then after looking at lots of like probably sat over the website more things, which didn't help. And then just like did the back button on my browser, and it came back with a page. I copied it, pasted it, saved it. Anyway, after that, I got more curious about what code was. I started doing a lot of online learning, and then spoke to someone about one of those boot camps. I went to an open evening and realized that that was something I'd quite like to do. I spent a bit more time studying just to see if I really wanted to make that career move. And yeah, started from there.
And Maria, could you share your insight into how you got into the tech industry as well? As someone who's fresh into your first job, I'm curious to know, was it something that you started from middle school? Is it something that you've always enjoyed?
I started quite young. I was in high school. I studied back, I'm from Romania, so I studied there. And back home, everybody studies computer science in high school, so that's how I got into it. And my teacher was very supportive, and she saw potential in me, so she encouraged me to apply the computer science degree at uni. It was quite an interesting experience to be studying computer science, and back home, a large percentage of students are women, it's about 30%, which I was very surprised to find out a couple of weeks ago. And although we were a lot of women, how do I put this nicely? There are a lot of teachers that were very old school, so didn't really believe that women belong in technology. So getting comments and being yelled at for being a woman by the people who are supposed to be your mentors is really bad for your confidence.
I can imagine.
It took me a long time to understand it's not my fault. And although with all of these, I managed to graduate. And just before graduating, I started applying for jobs. And I was determined to leave because all I wanted at that point was a bit more respect because I knew what I was capable of. So I got into a graduate program at the Guardian. That's how I did.
And Ina, I know that you come from a marketing background. Can you share with us how you got into it?
So with marketing, I think it was something I always wanted to get into. And I know that when I do a lot of these talks or talk to the users in my community, one thing that they always say is that I wish I had more opportunity to find out what a career in tech would be like. So I was actually very fortunate that I always knew what that was going to look like because my mom's a chemist. But the thing is, to me, a career in science and technology was my mom in a lab gown, in the R&D lab, and that wasn't for me. And it took me a while to kind of get around to the idea that that's okay. And so I was always chatty, so I always knew that was going to turn into a career for me at some point. And I wanted to get into advertising, and I come from the Philippines, came to London with no job or flat, bought a one-way ticket, and thought I was going to make it in the ad industry here. Found out very early on that wasn't going to be very easy. So then I said, okay, cast my net wider. I studied marketing, so let's go into all sorts of marketing. What are the things I like? Okay, fashion, sports. Let's do fashion and sports marketing. They weren't paying anything that was going to keep me living in London for more than a month. And then when I was on LinkedIn, I looked and there were so many roles in tech marketing. And it just at the time was not an industry that I found exciting. The only reason why I thought a career in tech was exciting was because I watched an Oprah episode when I was 10, where they did a campus tour of Google, and I thought, oh my god, that looks super cool. So unfortunately, Google wasn't hiring at that time. So that's how I fell into BrightTalk, which is also my first real job out of university. And I was called in to manage our IT service management community. And that was when I realized, I've moved on since then, I've done IT service management, I've done BI and big data, asset management, and eventually fintech. And it's interesting because despite the fact that my role is more marketing, content, community-based, and I never work in a tech-focused role, I can talk about blockchain till no end. I can talk about PSD2 open banking, AI machine learning, very high-level stuff. But I know what my audience and my users want to know about it. I know how to work with tech companies to make sure that sometimes these more complex things that they want to talk about, I know how to make sure that it's reaching their target audience. So that, I think, is how I, again, fell into it. It took me a while to consider myself to be part of the tech industry and the tech community because I did have that tech focused role.
Yeah, the traditional, yeah.
Exactly, and that's why I'm really happy to be again on the panel with all of these ladies to show that there are different faces to tech. It doesn't have to be just one or the other, because sometimes I think that we run into the issue that we become very exclusive by saying, oh, you don't do this sort of role, or this is more important than this, and there's a hierarchy within the tech industry. And I just want people to know that based on your interests, you do belong, you will find a place in it.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Moving forward, Phoebe, what would you do differently if you were starting out again?
So actually, I wouldn't do anything differently. I guess I should tell you how I started out for you to. So for me, as I said, I worked in finance. I didn't have a tech background. I think I sort of got inspired, a bit similar to you, which was I had my own sort of business idea. And luckily, I lived with a friend who was a software engineer, and he built a little sort of UI thing for me, and I started sort of playing around with it. Anyway, sort of time, life got in the way, and I sort of dropped it. And then a year later, I was really bored at work and not happy, and I started to do sort of online courses, free ones, in my spare time. So Code Academy, big shout out, amazing. Also, eventually as well, you're doing it by yourself, and actually being able to work with people who do it for a living is really important. So if you're not familiar with it, Code Bar, incredible organisation. They move around weekly, sometimes do twice a week, where a company hosts, and they pair you up with someone who has experience, and you can bring in your own work, or you can go through one of their tutorials, and they'll go through it with you. So I started doing that more and more often, and I just got obsessed, and I felt like I had a natural sort of high afterwards, and I was just so like, so happy. And then I thought, well, how am I going to get into it? I don't have a computer science background. So I applied for a number of graduate schemes. I was like, it doesn't matter if I'm, 7, 8 years older than everyone else, I still look, youthful. No, I didn't think that. I just thought, it's a grad scheme. They don't, it doesn't matter how old you are. It's for people to learn. And yes, I admit, some grad schemes were like, you have to have done computer science. However, a lot of grad schemes, didn't have that sort of condition. And also, I managed to get on a grad scheme, and I got a couple of offers, and they're the ones that weren't testing you for what you know, but rather testing how do you think, how do you work in a team. Programming has come such a long way. It's no longer in a dark room, you must code by yourself in isolation. Luckily, because if you hadn't realised I'm a bit of an extrovert, it's about pair programming. Like, that's a really, really popular way of coding. And so they test you and sort of see how you interact with all these other strengths. And, because of that, I managed to get the job. So I do recommend, for me, I love how I came to it, and I do recommend do grad schemes. It doesn't matter how old you are, what your background is. If it's a good company, you have a good HR department, and they'll test you in the correct way.
I love that. That was really, really inspiring. And it's true, right? There's so many things that you can do to educate yourself and get yourself out there. And if you have an interest in it, go for it.
Yeah.
Tina, same question for you. Is there anything that you would do differently if you started out again?
So starting out my career, I think what I would do along the way is after I had children, I took a break. And I definitely, if I were me talking to my younger self, I would say not to take a break, to continue on with your career, because that break didn't just, when you're out of technology for 6 months, it feels like 10 years. But it's not just that, it's then kind of re-entering to find kind of that stable ground of where you are and where you now have continued on in your path. And for me, it was more that I kind of was unclear, like, where do I go from here? And how do I find my way again? And do I want to do that again? Was that really what I wanted to do? Or did I do it because that's where just kind of everything led me? And, being in Silicon Valley, it's just, that's what everybody does. and by that point I had moved to London, and it wasn't as kind of, this is what everybody does. And then I went back to do a graduate degree and thought, I might go into therapy. I might be a therapist. And then I said, you know what? No, I want to reapply what I've built on and what I know, but then take this new learning and take me in a direction that I want to go. And I went back, kind of reapplied. I remember I interviewed with an organization, or it was a consultancy, and they said, yes, we're going to be hiring a consultant for big data. And I said, I really have to tell you, I know nothing about big data, nothing, I can barely spell it. And they were like, perfect, you're hired. And they were like, but you have all the other skills that we don't have.
Yeah.
And I said, but I don't know anything about how to work with all these huge, like, Hadoops and Badoops and whatever you want to call it. And they're like, we'll teach you, but you have everything else that we need.
Great. Natalie, as someone who did take a break in their career, I'm curious to know what obstacles did you have to overcome with that?
There was a couple really. First of all, it was my own perception of whether I could actually do this in the first place. So I had to really work hard on building up my confidence. So I went to a lot of the networking groups that are there for women in tech, just to sit there and listen to people and hear about their own stories and what they were doing, and just to get that validation that, yeah, I could do this. And then once I've got that confidence and gone through learning through resources online, a lot of the stuff that's mentioned, I've gone through the same things myself. It's then, I found it quite easy, because I've got my own tech startup, to actually get taken seriously with that. It was quite easy, but to actually get an employer to take me seriously as a woman coming into it now, when I haven't had a tech job before, that was quite tough too. So I've had to overcome other people's perceptions of myself as well. So you have to fight a little bit harder. You've got to be pretty resilient, but you have to make sure that you stay remembering what your worth is, and have a really good support network around you to just keep reminding you just how good you are and that you can do it, and that helps get you through.
And Danielle, did you have any obstacles that you've had to face throughout your career as well, as someone who started a little bit untraditional as well?
Yeah, I suppose when I joined certain roles, I probably felt maybe I was at a lower level, or I lacked certain information because I didn't do a computer science degree. But what I found is that you can always speak to people and learn from them, and also watching a lot of YouTube videos on talks or conferences, or if I haven't understood anything, I just type it into YouTube and someone's going to talk about it. And yeah, that's, I guess, my biggest obstacle.
Yeah, fair enough. Clearly self-learning has been a big thing in all of your careers. So Tina, back to you. I was wondering, do you see any role models for older women in tech, and do you think there needs to be more?
So for many years, when I started off, I was searching for female role models.
Yeah.
And I would see women that had very senior leadership titles. I would see women that were far in their career. But what I look for in someone that I choose and that I'd want to work with, their behavior wasn't consistent to what I was looking for, and I had to become the role model that I was looking for because I couldn't find it. And men or women, because it wasn't just it wasn't just, oh, I have to look for a female role model. It was a role model, and so that's kind of where I've gone to. There's definitely someone that, and for the last 10 years, they've been mentoring and coaching me, but that role model, I couldn't find it.
And you've become one yourself, clearly, so it's excellent. Maria, as someone who is fresh into this industry, have you had a role model throughout your experiences in university and starting your new job?
Sorry. So I got this question a lot, especially during interviews. It sounds like a very traditional question. I never had a role model. Maybe it was the environment I grew up in. Maybe, I don't know, there weren't enough women I was interacting with, but I never had a role model. And I do have people I look up to and that I admire, but I wouldn't go that far to say that they're my role models. This is what I sometimes tend to do, is I look up to all these people and all the things they've done, and my first thought is, will I ever be this good? So instead of doing that, I'll take my own friends or family as people I admire, but no, I've never picked someone to be my role model.
And Ida, I have the same question for you. Have you had a role model throughout your career?
I'm going to give the completely cliche answer and say it's my mom. But it is because, again, she went on a career path that was insanely different from me. But one thing that she did do growing up, which I think I will probably do with my future children, is she allowed me to try out every single thing I ever wanted to try. So I was that kid who had, summer evenings completely free, or after school things completely free. I went to after school computer science class. I actually wanted to do computer science. I did that. I did tennis lessons. I did softball. I did art. Like, honestly, you name it. And a friend of hers actually asked my mom, "Aren't you turning your daughter into a jack of all trades, master of none?" And my mom said that she always took it as, no, I didn't, because she got an opportunity to test out every single thing. And at the end of it, she dropped everything else and focused on two. There were two that I clearly picked on, and softball was one of them, and I ended up doing softball all throughout my entire career, and I was a varsity player in university and all of that. So she said, but I'm so happy that I was given that opportunity to do that. And I think that, funnily enough, that's why I look at her as my role model, because that's something that I look for in my career as well. With my, with a manager, is that I want someone who can keep me focused, but still allow me to look around and try out different projects or different areas of interest. Because I think the worst thing ever you can do is have someone on your team who is actually unhappy doing a role that they were initially assigned to, and then they realize down the line that actually they don't want to do it anymore, but they don't know what they want to do because they weren't given a chance to actually venture outside of that and see if there was something else out there.
Yeah, of course.
When I first moved into a management role, my old manager was definitely my role model. I wanted to completely just be him because he was such an incredible manager and gave me such an incredible view on what it could be to be a really good manager. And in a way that actually held me back more than not having a role model, because I was trying to be him rather than be myself. So I've kind of since then tried not to think of just one person as that's what I want to be, because it's sometimes just as unhelpful as it can be helpful. And it might be better to say, I like that bit about that person, I like that bit about that person, but none of them are who I am and who I want to be. I want to be me. That sounds like a song. So I think it's more important to kind of think more about not just have one role model that you're aiming at, but more, there are so many women here that are inspiring and that I admire and that I've talked to and met, and it's some part of all of that. It builds up to what I'm looking for and where I would like to be in the future.
Yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree with what everyone said, and I think where it's sort of, I don't know whether role model or representation is maybe the slightly better word, but it's with sort of children. Essentially, and it's, they did a survey kind of thing, test with these group of school children, mixed class, different backgrounds, and I think they were aged 8 or something like that, and they told all the kids to draw a fireman, to draw a doctor, to draw a pilot, and I think out of 50 drawings, only 5 were women. And there was no lead, there was literally, and I think right there, that's the thing we start to need to change. And these are 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds, I mean, how disturbing is that? And that's what we need to, essentially start to change.
Yeah, I've seen that as well myself, and it's it was quite shocking
Yeah,
to
terrifying.
just even think that, right? That in such a modern time, and we believe we've progressed so much, but then when you go back to the basics and talk to children, it's shocking. Moving on, what skills have you had to learn to excel in your current role that you didn't realize you needed? Emily?
I submitted that question, and I regret it. I think for me, management was always something that I was interested in, and it was something that I had a lot of natural kind of ability in, and that was why I wanted to do it. I think the thing is, it's just like, it's the constant picking yourself back up again. It's not so much of a skill, it's just something that you get better at over time. It's just like, that didn't work, let's try something else. Okay, that didn't work, let's try something else. Okay, that person hasn't agreed with me, let's try something else. And just kind of that resilience of like continuing and trying and not giving up. I think that's the biggest skill, I suppose, I've had to learn.
Fair enough. Natalie, I have the same question for you. Have you had to learn any skills to excel in your current role that you didn't think?
It's been a bit of a change in that I'm used to just working for myself and getting an idea and running with it and not having to check with anybody else. So working with a team, it's a big shift in how I've had to think. So now I'm trying to find the balance, because now I'm scared of, do I just do this? Who do I need to talk to? I don't want to upset the way of things. So then you end up not really doing anything at all, because you don't want to step on anybody's toes. So it's finding that fine balance of how that all fits in with the team, and I'm getting there, I think.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah, but I definitely love being part of a team now. It's really nice being able to interact with people and bounce ideas around and learn from people. So yeah, that's definitely something I've had to stop and think and take on board.
And Danielle, I have the same question for you. Is there any skills you've had to learn throughout that you didn't realize you needed them?
Yeah, so when I joined, I thought everything was just about coding, right? I'm a programmer, that's what I do all day. But last year I had the opportunity of speaking at a conference, and public speaking is something that still scares me, but I still took on the challenge, and I ended up speaking at 3 different conferences last year, and I've learned so much out of it. I've learned that you don't have to be an expert to speak at a conference. That's a big one. I was so intimidated by all the people speaking. And I've got a lot out of it. I've been invited to be part of the conference committee at work, and I've been invited to be a mentor at the Google Summer of Code, just because I went out and I spoke about my experience with coding. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, whatever it is, the new skill that I'm trying to do, the important thing is say yes to the things that sound a bit scary but also exciting. That's a big thing.
Perfect. My favorite question of the evening. How great, I want to ask all of you this actually, how great do you feel now that you've achieved your goal into breaking into the tech industry?
Well, I guess I'm really happy about it. I think I'm happy, and I guess in a way it's a little bit of a shock happy, just because, again, I never had a dream to be in the tech industry. I know that that's a very different story to a lot of people who knew from the beginning they wanted to get into it. But I think that what makes me very happy, I guess more happy than I should be, is that I was able to stick to my guns in every part of my career, that I still concentrated on what do I actually enjoy doing. So I started with, I always believe this, you start off with interests, and then after that you think, okay, which of my interests can actually be skills? And then you think about those skills. And then, okay, now which jobs are there out there that will use those skills? So I think a big issue is a lot of people do it the other way around. They look at, here are the jobs I want. Okay, I want to do that job. But one, are you interested in it? Do you want it because maybe it's a higher paying role? Maybe it's in a location that you like? And then also, then they start thinking, oh wait, do I have the skills for it? And then that's where the conundrum comes about, that you're actually not a very good fit for that, and then you get stressed out because of it. So mine is that I was able to turn, I think, my interests into skills and into a career, and that I enjoy what I'm doing. And I am, again, just happy in a place that I didn't think I would enjoy in the first place?
That was a great answer. I think, you know, it is that, right? Like, you spend so much of your time at work, so much of your waking hours are spent in the office. You may as well do something you enjoy out of that time. And I think for me, every time I've, you know, done something new or taken on a new role, it's because it's been exciting to me and because I wanted to be involved in it. And so I followed, like, kind of what I felt was right at the time. And it's taken me to somewhere that I really enjoy. But I think also, like, when I was leaving my old role, it was just really important for me to go, actually, I'm not enjoying this anymore, and it's time for me to do something else. And I think just being really honest with yourself about that is really important to make sure that you end up with something that you're happy doing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, from doing, being in another industry that really wasn't for me, and now finding something that I really enjoy, the difference is huge.
I don't just want to say ditto, but almost. So yeah, completely agree. I absolutely love what I do. Really interested in, like, the products that I'm working on, but mostly people. I think computer science, software engineers get a bad rep. It is, you know, so sociable. It is so creative. Yes, you know, every day I get to be creative and I get to solve problems. And there's so many different ways to write a bit of code. And yes, some ways are explicitly wrong, but there are a number of ways to, I don't know why they say skin a cat, because it's not very inviting, but there's a number of ways to, you know, write it. And yeah, every day I'm just really happy, and we do TDD, so, you know, red, and then you go green, and I get a buzz every time it turns green. So yeah, I'd recommend everyone, it's not just programming, you can do UX, UI, management, marketing. There's such a range, and you get to work in such a diverse type of products or industries and sectors, and yeah, do it.
Yeah, it's a real roller coaster actually. I'm really pleased that I've finally got to do what I want to do, but it is just the start for me, and I've got big plans ahead. So, but what I do hope is that it gives other people the validation that they can do it too, because I would love to see a lot more older women in tech, and they are just not there, that I can find that have done the same thing, coming back in after huge career breaks. So for me, the next bit that I would really love to see is more women doing the same and having the confidence to do the same.
I think we all agree with you with that one.
And I would just add to that, for me, it's making sure every time something gets a little bit challenging, and I'm afraid, and I think I can't do it, and I'm in this room with all these really technical, super smart people, to choose to keep walking with my fear and choose my courage, because I think that's where, at least for me, I've done it before, where I said, oh, I'll take the easier road, and it wasn't easier. I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I apparently, I bought the dream, and the dream was a nightmare. And I'm choosing what I want to do to create the platform and the vision for my life. And I'm also choosing the quality of my life, because it can get so, there's so many ways you can solve a problem, choose a path, and at the end of the day, it's your life, and it's the quality that you're choosing to create for yourself. That's what I would say.
It's tough to be the last one. Yeah, so I guess I'm really excited to work in tech. It's such a good time to be in tech as well. There's so many things happening, and it's exciting to see how many women start to come and realize that there is space for them. And also, as you said, it's no matter how difficult is it at your job, it's good to go back and know that you can do something else as well. So tech is quite relaxed, and I kind of like that part of it, because there are so many other things I enjoyed. And I feel very bad if I would just ignore them, because my whole life has turned into my job. So I'm really glad to be in tech, and to make a change, to make a difference every day. It's also a big part of it.
Thanks so much, ladies. I'd now like to open the discussion up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions? I don't think we have a microphone, so you might have to shout a little bit. Thank you.
all, thank you. I've really enjoyed all your contributions. I know Natalie. I'm 55 and I'm creating my own curriculum to get into tech. So I've got a very unconventional background. I don't find recruiters helpful at all. Quite frankly, they've been a complete waste of time. That's been my experience. Given that experience, I'd like your guidance in terms of how could I repurpose and repackage an unconventional background to enter the tech industry.
I can start, but then I guess maybe hand over to more down there. I'm hoping, I'd like to think all of the hiring that I've been involved in has been skills-based rather than person-based. So a skilled person, who wouldn't want that on their team? Like, I'd love it on my team, apply for a job with me. Okay, good. And I think it is about, like, for technical recruitment, for me it very is much about if you think the right way and you have the right skills and you know what you're doing, then who cares what your background is, it doesn't matter. And I'd much rather have a diverse background than one that every single person has done a computer science degree and is exactly the same. So for me that would be a win rather than a downside if I was looking into technical recruitment.
I think what just happened here was exactly what I was going to say, which is going to network events can be very helpful. You know, you get to meet people, you get to talk to people, and you know, if someone's talking to you and you know you seem confident, you seem very friendly, you know, if someone has a position open, or maybe they know someone who has a position, at these kind of events, like use them as opportunities to like get to know people and you know genuinely swap details. So I think having that contact just like this is really, really useful. And as I said, graduate schemes, you know, if you want to, one great thing about a graduate scheme is it is open to everyone. You don't even have to have gone to university. You could have just had, you know, years of some work experience, you know, whatever your background is. And what's great about graduate schemes is you move around into different teams. So, you know, you can get exposure to, say, Scala, backend APIs, or full stack JavaScript, or product ownership, you know, UX. So don't knock graduate schemes because it has the word graduate in it. That's all I'm saying.
Hi, my name is Helena. I work for National Institute of Health Research. I'd like to start by thanking Signify and BrightTalk for putting on this event, inviting all these amazing speakers. My question is, first of all, to Tina about business development and what are the unique key features of business development in tech compared to other sectors? And my other question is for anyone who has the experience about working in small startups versus bigger companies, and what are the perks, benefits, or challenging in working in small teams versus very defined and big team organizations? Thank you.
So I'll probably take the last part first. I would say it's definitely very personal whether you want to do a startup or a large organization. I've always been at startups until this one, and the only reason why I chose it is because it has a startup feel. It's very much around innovation, and you can choose where you want to go. If you have an idea about something, you can put it forward, and that's kind of how I've always been and been surrounded by the people that I've worked with. And I think for me, that's what's always kept me, because I kind of tried a bigger company that didn't have that feel, and it just was so not me. But it to each his own. And then business development, it could be seen in many different ways. I think there's so many different definitions. The way I define it is that you're consistently kind of having that innovative, like, what can I do? You're working with people to take something like machine learning and trying to crystallize it so anybody and everybody can understand what you're talking about, what the value is, and then how do you then demonstrate that value back to your organization to say, actually, this is what's really resonating with people. This is not what's resonating.
You know, if you frame it this way, people may not be clear on what you're talking about, but if you frame it another way, they've got it. So it's kind of the translator type role, as well as trying to see what the value in what people are trying to do with technology.
Anyone else have an answer to that question?
Yeah. I have an answer to the question about the small company, startup versus big company. I've worked at both, and I started off as a startup. The difference, well, I had a perception of what a bigger company would be like, and that's why I wanted to start off as a startup. What you get as small companies, I think, well, from my experience, I found that there was more pressure, and that's sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. You got to take on lots of responsibility that perhaps at a bigger company you wouldn't have been able to do. But moving to a bigger company, I found I've been able to learn a bit more and learn a lot with other developers around me because you've had more time and perhaps more time to write better code without the strict deadlines and maybe lack of resources that you have at a startup.
Anyone else? Any more questions from the audience? I see one in the back there.
I can announce, so what would you suggest for someone who's trying to make a complete career change from PR into tech? So I have a friend who has gone and done interviews, but she keeps getting turned away because her background is in PR. How would you go from something completely different, teaching yourself on the side through Code Academy, but not being able to progress past the first or second interview?
So I would ask, is the first or second interview technical?
I guess, yeah, I think it is. She has the background that she's in at the bottom level because she's being turned away from no, your background is this. At least she was going into this.
I would say she has to reframe it to show them the value that she brings. Because if you keep trying to fit yourself in the other person's mold, you're never gonna you can't convince someone. But if you reframe it to say, this is why you wanna hire somebody like me, if you keep going the same way you're going, you're gonna keep getting the same answers. You want someone that can bring this kind of perspective. And along with the skill set that she's learning and bringing and developing, I would say she just shows them what an asset she is.
I think, yeah, completely following up from that, have a look over the cover letter and CV. Any job that you've ever done or any degree you've done, you can apply some of those skills, or all of it, most of those skills, to software engineering. You know, my partner and I were speaking to someone who was a chef, and they were retraining to try and be a software engineer. And they literally had on their CV one tiny line of it, and they hadn't mentioned it at all in their cover letter. And I was like, you're dealing under like huge amounts of stress, like time pressure. You have to be creative, you have to think on your feet. Also, like I would want to interview you. You're a chef who's retraining, like by yourself, as like whatever you've got, work it, first of all. And also, again, I think trying to go to sort of networking events. Also, so recently we've hired someone who trained in architecture. She hasn't done a boot camp, but she's been teaching herself how to code, she's gone to Code Bar, she's been volunteering at conferences so she can get a free ticket, help volunteer, and she went to a Silicon Milk Roundabout event, we had a table there, got chatting to her, and I think showing your passion, both whilst engaging conversationally, you know, I'm excited by this, that is priceless. And then being able to say, I've done this, I've done that. Oh, I've got a GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever you use. All of this stuff signals to someone, you really want to do this. And actually, that amount of energy you want on your team, like you can't, yeah. So I just say work on all of those things.
Okay, unfortunately, that's all we have for this evening.